Today on Biblical Higher Ed Talk, I sit down with Michael Lindsay, president of Taylor University, to talk about his leadership experiences. Michael will be one of our plenary speakers at ABHE's 2025 annual meeting. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm your host, Philip Dearborn, president of ABHE. And we are honored to have as our guest this week, Michael Lindsay. Michael is the president of Taylor University. And I'm absolutely thrilled, Michael, that you have accepted the invitation to be with us in Orlando this coming February at ABHE's annual meeting that's happening February 19 to 21. Michael has a distinguished career in presidential leadership, as well as being an author. His most recent book, which if you've not read it or heard of it, I highly recommend that you look at the show description, and we'll have a link there to Amazon where you can actually order his book, Hinge Moments, Making the Most of Life's Transitions. Michael, that was a fabulous book, very well written. But I've invited Michael in not to talk about the book, but to talk about some of his presidential leadership experiences as we anticipate hearing him at our annual meeting in February. So welcome to the show, Michael. Thank you so much for making time to be with us.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to be on. Thanks for having me today, Phil.
Absolutely. So our audience can get to know you a little bit. We've got some questions specifically about leadership and presidential leadership. But before we dive into those questions, tell us about a defining moment in your life that God used to kind of propel you forward to where you are as Taylor University's president.
Well, clearly it would be the season I went through when I sensed that God was calling for me to be willing to step down from a job that I loved, that I thought I would do the rest of my career, serving as the president of Gordon College, a Christian liberal arts college on the North Shore in Boston. Being a Christian college president in New England is a tough job. It's not a friendly environment for the faith-based sector, but we have made some great progress and done a number of different things. We've been working for 9 years to be able to do a tuition reset that would allow us to significantly decrease the cost to attend. But in order to do that, you have to grow revenues, decrease expenses, and that takes a long time to do. And I built a great leadership team, and I was feeling really good about where we were going. But I just began getting these signals from God that I ought to be really willing to step away from that job. I realized that in some ways I had made my profession a bit of an idol. And, when your idols are threatened, we become quite nervous. And it took a number of months for me to really get to a place where I was willing to surrender, and several different signposts along the way, which I'd be happy to talk about, that I felt like the Lord was really calling for me to be willing to step away. The reason it's tough is because I loved being a university president, and I thought it was a good fit for my skill set. And I was starting to enjoy some of the labor that we had put in over many years was starting to bear great fruit. And when you're a university president of a place like Gordon or Taylor, it's kind of like you're an NFL quarterback. There's only 31 other teams you could possibly play for, and the likelihood of them needing a quarterback that year is not very great. So I thought I was giving up a vocation that I had come to love and appreciate. In God's providence, the Lord opened up a door that I never dreamed, and I'm living in the cornfields of Indiana now. But when I started on that journey, it was very much a defining moment of, would I be willing to be obedient? And I have to say, it took many months for me to get to that place of obedience. But I'm so glad that I did. My family and I feel very confirmed in what we're doing. It's turned out to be really great. But it was definitely a challenging season, and I will remember it the rest of my life.
Yeah, and you can definitely see some of those lessons learned or experiences in your book, Hinge Moments, because clearly that was a big decision for you. And just that ability to recognize those signposts along the way. And those who listen to this podcast know that my favorite verse is Proverbs 16:9, "In his heart a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps." And I just see that happen so many times in so many of our guests that we have on, that God uses circumstances, God uses events. We have a master plan for our life, yet God is there directing each one of those steps. And somehow in the clash, and we're not going to get into this theologically right now, but somehow in the clash of his sovereignty and our choice in what we do, come together. And it's this beautiful image of being surrendered to him. for his service. And that clearly comes through in your story and that transition.
It was a defining moment, and I'm grateful to be on the other side.
Absolutely. And sometimes it takes time to get to that point, right? I know that from my own life as I look back and see some of the transitions that it takes some time to reflect back, but you're just so thankful that we follow a sovereign God who has our interests at heart when he guides those steps. God is using you in significant ways, has used you in significant ways in higher education, Christian higher education, but even broader than that as an author. And I would say at two flagship institutions in North America. And being at Taylor, I had the chance to visit with you. A lot of construction going on. But before we talk about what you're doing at Taylor, what motivates you to do the work of being a college president?
I imagine most of us who are in Christian higher education are in that calling in part because we ourselves were deeply shaped during the college years. And I had the benefit of going to a faith-based school, and I had mentors, professors, encouragers along the way who really made a profound impact. What I love is that during those university years, students are making really big decisions about the course and direction for their life and their mission, and maybe, finding the love of their life. And you get a chance to just enjoy the fruit of other people's, 18 to 20 years worth of labor, of parents and coaches and teachers and ministers who've helped speak into the lives of these young people. And you just happen to come alongside of in the very season where they're making the really big decisions of life. And so that's extremely motivating to get a chance to be part of their experiences. I was deeply shaped during my college years. And so it's fun to be able to come alongside, and particularly helping to shape the next generation is very motivating to me. So I've always loved higher education. I like the seasonality of it. I love that things start and they finish, whether you want it or not. I like that. When I was working in the private sector, it was like being on a treadmill. It just never ended. So I like that sort of seasonality. And I also love the opportunity to see a fresh cohort of new students every year. It just adds energy and excitement. And I get super jazzed as we welcome new students to campus.
Well, it definitely comes through. And I would think, and I've spoken with many college and university presidents, that, you can get caught up in a lot of the, there's just so many stakeholders, there's so many issues that you're having to deal with, that if you focus on those things, it can be a pretty negative experience. But when you're focused on the end product of the students and really the responsibility you have, I think there's a term in loco parentis, right? That has had been used and it kind of went away, but I'm actually seeing it come back again, of the role of the university that it plays in place of parents, that trust. They're trusting you with the students that are coming to your campus.
Yeah. It's interesting. A couple of summers ago, my wife and I went on a Christian pilgrimage that began in Jerusalem and wound up in London. So we went to several different sites throughout church history in the Middle East and in Europe. And part of the reason we did that is because so much of being a university leader is finance and legal and personnel and strategic planning, which are all really important and significant work. But you need every so often something that causes us to lift our heads and to be reminded of, we're part of something that's been making a difference for over 1,000 years. And to stand in the palace school at Aachen that Charlemagne established in Aachen, Germany in 800, which was the first secondary school in the world, you realize there have been Christians who've gone before us who've been involved in the educational task. And we're just stewards of doing something that's been going on. The Lord has used in profound ways for a long time. And that's really helpful because you can get bogged down in the day-to-day nitty-gritty finance, legal, personnel issues and lose sight of the much larger transforming work that's occurring all around us and that we get to be a part of every single day.
Right. And I look around at the landscape of ABHE schools, which is a smaller sector within the broader Christian higher education market. 72,000 students that are, woke up today on a college campus, starting their fall semester and sensing that God has called them to something. And it's a stewardship, it's a privilege, it's all of those things that we're called. And I've said this before, on this side of eternity, we'll never know the full impact, but that's not for ours to figure out. It's the stewardship, it's the process. our lives have intersected for this point. And I have been out of higher education directly at an institution. I'll tell you, Michael, I miss that. I miss the opportunity to engage directly on students' lives. And it's such a privilege to do. So an encouragement to our listeners out there. Yes, a lot of headaches come, but boy, the privilege we have to work with students. So I visited with you at Taylor a couple months ago, and you showed me around a bit, a ton of construction happening. So talk to us about your vision for Taylor, particularly in these culturally turbulent times.
Well, I think that there's two things that we have the opportunity to live into a unique calling that I hope all of us who are trying to be Christian institutions and live into the fullness of the gospel are committed to. We really want to embody grace and truth in every way that we can. So grace in that we want to be a community that people grow and develop, and that occurs in the context of relationships. So we want to be highly relational campuses where students and faculty get a chance to know each other, not just in the classroom, but over a cup of coffee, where those kind of mentoring, discipling relationships can take place over months, even years, and then help to form the kind of fabric of support. So that really is exciting to me. And then also the truth. We really believe that all truth is God's truth. And so whether we are studying, a Greek exegesis of a New Testament passage, or thinking about how does this ethical dilemma relate to contemporary political life, we want the truth of the gospel to inform all that we're about. And so holding those two things, John, such a careful writer, describes Jesus as being full of both grace and truth. If that was good enough for Jesus, it certainly ought to be good enough for us. And so we're trying to do that at Taylor, and I'm excited about the opportunities that are before us. I've always been a glass half full kind of guy, but I have to say I'm very bullish. I think that the pandemic really raised the value proposition of a lot of higher education, and families are now saying, I want something more than just, can my kid get a good degree? I'm really thinking about who's shaping them and what's their life going to be like, and what's the community in which they are being nurtured and supported, and what are the values that they're forming. And I'm very confident that ABHE schools are on the right path to helping those families inculcate the kind of godly vision and Christ-honoring values that will serve these students well over the long haul.
Yeah, and you said it so well, and it's a tremendous opportunity that we have in front of us. The public is aware now more than ever of their perception, and often a negative perception, of higher education in general. And I think biblical higher education, Christian higher education, we have an amazing story to tell. We are not the large institutions that are charging $98,000 a year now. I think that's the highest in the country. $400,000 for a college experience. What's that value proposition, right?
Yeah.
But we have such an amazing story to tell, and balancing truth in the mix of all of that is what an opportunity for us. Tell us a little bit about some of the physical changes that you're doing there on campus.
Well, we're in a growth mode, so we're seeing our largest on-campus enrollment this fall, which has been a wonderful encouragement. And so we have added residence halls. So we built 5 residential townhouses, each of which can house about 32 students. The reason we liked it is we could get that done in less than a year. It didn't require the kind of capital investment that an entire residence hall would require. And it was responsive to our students' requests for more apartment-like living. But, 10 years from now, if we have an enrollment downturn, we could convert those to be able to use them for members of the community. So we like that it gave us some optionality, which I think is really important. So we just dedicated that last week, which is great, and added some beds. We have our newest academic building on campus, which will house film and media, which is an award-winning program Taylor's had for over a decade. And then our burgeoning program in innovation and entrepreneurship. And those are housed in a new academic building of about 40,000 square feet called the Horn Academic Center. And we, in the process of moving in right now, we will have the dedication for that in a couple of months. And that's been exciting because we've not had a new academic building in about a decade. So we've been working on that. We needed to renovate our dining hall. It had not been renovated in about 50 years. So imagine cooking out of the same kitchen for 50 years. There was a need for improvement, but it's been transformational and it's been really great. And in the process of that and a few additional dining venues we opened up across campus, we've been able to increase our dining capacity by about 50%, which we needed to do. And we've got a whole host of other sort of new academic spaces, a new nursing suite. We're launching a nursing program in a year, and a new physician assistant studies suite, which we're launching in 2 years. So a variety of different new academic spaces on campus.
So I would think a lot of your time is in the fundraising world.
A lot of my time is in the fundraising world. Yeah, every day in one way or another, I'm hoping to secure support for the university.
Talk to us too about, which I love, is because I think as presidents, and if we have presidents who are listening in on this, the importance of connecting with your community. And one of the projects is the front of the campus, but basically is the town. So tell us about that specific project.
Yeah, it was interesting because we did a development of a strategic plan 3 years ago. And one refrain that kept emerging that I was not expecting is that Taylor needed to do more to be a blessing to its local community. We're in a small town called Upland, Indiana, about 2,000 residents. So when our campus is in session, we double the population in town. And many people said, we ought to be doing everything we can to be a blessing to our friends and neighbors. So we began thinking about what would that entail? How do we take some of the projects that we're doing here? So we launched a health clinic for basic health counseling and training for folks who might be struggling with diabetes or trying to get fit. And so using some of our students to help provide some of that kind of coaching. And that's turned out to be a really great, successful pilot program that we're now seeing a whole host of other ways that we can take some of the entrepreneurial energy of our students and our faculty and to be a blessing to the community. So we applied for and received a wonderful grant from the Lilly Endowment, which then catalyzed some more investment. So we've got a vision for $100 million investment in our local community. And so far, we've raised about $60 million of that $100 million. And so it's hard at work. So when you came to campus, Philip, we had the main street is under renovation. And so there's lots of side streets you have to travel down. We have lots of construction projects. We're hoping to build a collegiate inn close to our campus, 1 or 2 restaurants, maybe a coffee shop, bakery, renovating the town library. Most of the town hall we want to renovate. We want to put in a mixed-use building that would create some additional businesses and maybe some residential space up top, hoping to add about 100 homes into the housing stock in the area and maybe even a planned community for 55 plus folks. So there's a lot of fun things that are happening, and it's a great time.
It's so inspirational to hear that. And I think that's some of the untold story, which is why we do this podcast, is we need to tell the story of Christian higher education, biblical higher education, because the narrative that we hear, unfortunately, is not reflective of what our sector of colleges and universities are doing. And here you are being responsive to the community and reaching the community. And that's showing Jesus to those around you. And it's a responsibility that we have because our colleges and universities are embedded in communities. And boy, right on our doorstep, we have an opportunity to minister and show the love of Christ to those around. So job well done. I think it's a model for a lot of people to follow.
I appreciate that. Thank you. We're excited about it and hoping that we'll be able to see some good results. We want to build the most charming small town in America. So we're working on it.
And if ever you're it's Upland, right? Upland,
it's in
Indiana.
Upland, yeah. Halfway between Indianapolis and Fort Wayne. We'd love for people to stop by.
Yeah, please do stop by. When you say it's a small town, it truly is a small town, but you're making every opportunity to make it better for everyone involved. So you're going to be at our annual meeting. So thank you again for accepting coming over to Orlando and being one of 4 plenary speakers for our annual meeting. Our theme is around discipleship, which is taken from the Great Commission to go and make disciples. That really defines the core, the ethos, really what we're about in biblical higher education. And I also think in all of Christian higher education. And you alluded to this a little bit before, but talk to us how discipleship has impacted your personal journey.
Well, I would say, my spiritual journey, my coming to know Jesus more fully has definitely been through the mentorship of a couple of individuals. My youth minister in my home church, First Baptist Church of Jackson, Mississippi, was a woman named Cindy Townsend. Her husband, Bill Townsend, was an administrator at Mississippi College, and they have been important disciplers in my life for a long time. I love them deeply. They've been great encouragers. And in fact, they came to visit me on campus a couple of months ago. So I was deeply shaped by them. Another is a mutual friend, Gary Cook, who's the president of Dallas Baptist University, now serves as their chancellor. Gary was a mentor and encourager to me, and he's been a really good example of how does a leader with a busy life with lots going on, how does he find ways to invest relationally and to make a positive difference? And Gary has certainly done that time and again for me, which I'm very grateful for. So that's been helpful. And I would say I've been blessed to have, George Gallup was a mentor to me who really encouraged me to take more seriously the claims of the gospel as I was in graduate school, living in Princeton, New Jersey, which is where he officed. And George really taught me the value of engaging in folks, in the lives of folks who have not had as many blessings or opportunities. So how does the gospel compel us to go and be a blessing to those who need it? Finding out ways that people help your spiritual disciplines on a daily basis. So I probably learned the value of scripture reading and prayer directly from Bill and Cindy Townsend when I was in junior high and high school. I learned a lot from Gary Cook about how I take my values or my spiritual commitments and apply them in an organizational setting. Because institutions can be ugly places, no institution is perfect, but Gary really modeled for me of how you can pursue virtue even in an organizational setting. And then George really taught me, how do you go beyond yourself? And how is it that you take the Great Commission to be involved in the lives of the poor and suffering and care about issues of mercy and justice, and how that informs what you do in your leadership. And the kind of work that we're doing here in town is informed in part by George's influence on my life. All three of them were great disciplers and certainly have shaped who I am.
So clearly you've established a pattern in your life that you're going to learn from other people, that you're going to subject yourself to be discipled by somebody else. Was that modeled for you? Where was it curiosity for you? What was it that caused you to seek after being discipled?
Both of my parents, my mom and my dad, were leaders in their own field. And so from the very earliest of ages, I watched how my folks took advice and sought out counsel from people who were further along in their professional journeys. And I'm sure that deeply shaped my own sort of interest in learning and growing. But I've always been a curious soul, and I've had a decent measure of interest of learning and growing and trying to get better along the way. And that I'm sure that has shaped who I am and perhaps made me more open to it. But also I'd say mentors really have a way of keeping you from making some of the same mistakes that they have made and helping you to get out of jams when you're in a tight spot. And I have oftentimes turned to my mentors to say, what would you do in this situation? They've been good encouragers to me.
Which is so wise. I use a term when I talk, one of my talks about leadership, that the higher you go in leadership, the fewer truth tellers you have around you, because they have various reasons why they're not necessarily showing you true reality, whether they're lying or not. That's not the issue. But to have those trusted people in your life that are not in your context, that you can reach out to and just say, hey, am I seeing this correct? Am I missing something here? They can speak truth into your life like nobody else can.
That's true. Absolutely.
Yeah. Gary Cook is somebody that we both know, and I've only recently gotten to know him, and he models discipleship, and he has discipled. I think of the NFL coaching trees that are out there. I think there's a college president tree out there, and
Gary is definitely the root of it. Goes way back for sure.
It does. And one of the things that I've observed, Michael, you have somebody working in your office, Noah. And what's kind of neat is you're being discipled, but then you're also feeling the importance of discipling others around you. Yeah.
I've been very blessed. I've been able to work throughout my career with amazing young people. And I find if you can recruit a really talented junior associate, oftentimes they can do the work of two peers if they're motivated and if you can give them opportunities they wouldn't otherwise get. So Noah will be with me when I come to Orlando, and he could probably tell you a little bit about his own experience. But I love investing in the next generation. So we have a particular student leadership program here on campus called the Presidential Fellows Program. Each president or vice president at the university has somebody working directly with them as a presidential fellow. The students sign a confidentiality agreement, which means that they have access to the conversations that happen in my office. They have a chance to see my email, but they help me do the job, but then they also learn the job. And to be able to learn, a college presidency when you're 22, long before you're having to do it yourself, but you can see what it looks like. It's like the most amazing leadership boot camp you can imagine. And I get a lot more out of it than the students do, but I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah, that's great. So that's one of the initiatives you have on campus. How else is Taylor addressing the overall picture of discipleship?
We really think it's important to do that in communities. So one of the distinctives of Taylor is a robust residence hall community. So 90% of our students live on campus in residence life. So it's a very tight-knit group. And in every wing, on every hall, every floor, we have a discipleship assistant who's helping to coordinate small groups or Bible studies or other forms of spiritual growth that occurs in community. So a group of guys get together to have a discussion of how do I overcome struggles with lust or pornography? Or we might have in one of the residence halls a group of women who have a prayer circle that every Wednesday night they pray for one another. Or we might have another wing that will include a weekly Bible study on the book of Jonah. So different ways that discipleship is occurring, but by having specific student leadership. And then we train and develop those students in a variety of different small group facilitation and those kinds of skills. And then every residence hall has a discipleship coordinator who's sort of making sure that all things work together. It's a pretty elaborate system that involves dozens of student leaders, but we equip and empower them, and then they in turn help to encourage more discipleship across campus, which I think is a real key to the kind of spiritual vibrancy we see at Taylor.
Yeah, so the discipleship leaders on the floors, they're different than the resident directors? Or
They are, yep. So they're not RAs or resident directors. It's just focused on discipleship. And typically they have responsibility for one or two events a week that's specifically focused around discipleship in small group settings.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wow. I'd love to, we could do a whole podcast on what that system looks like, but alas, time does not allow. Well, Michael, this has been a fantastic conversation. We really are looking forward to having you in Orlando. We only have 2 minutes left in our episode. So what's one final word of encouragement that you'd like to leave with our listeners? Our listeners are leaders in biblical and Christian higher education. A lot of them are emerging leaders. They're the 20-somethings, 30-somethings who are emerging at their institutions. What's one word of encouragement that you'd like to leave with them?
It's interesting. I was reading in my devotions not too long ago. I'm looking for it in Romans 15. I think that the tough thing about institutional leadership is that oftentimes we carry around and bear everybody's accumulated grievances against the institutions. Students who are upset because something didn't go wrong. Faculty who are still upset about a decision that was made 15 years ago, long before you were there. Alumni who, for one reason or another, the institution has disappointed them. And so they just bring a lot of energy and frustration sometimes. Now, of course, those are the minority of the folks that we deal with, but they're the ones who stick in our head. They're the ones that we sort of remember. And so I just hope and pray that all of us can be reminded of the good news that Paul writes in Romans 15, that the God of hope will fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. I certainly hope that will be true for all of us this year.
Amen. Amen. So well said. Michael, thank you again for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
I'm grateful to be on. Look forward to seeing you all in Orlando in February.
Absolutely. And if you're interested in finding out more information about Taylor University, we'll put the link to Taylor in our show description. We will also put there a link to Amazon where you can order Michael's most recent book, Hinge Moments. And we'll also put in there a link for you to register. Registration is open for our annual meeting in February. And why not register today? And you'll have the opportunity to hear and meet Michael in person. So until next time, stay kingdom focused.